This story starts as a proclamation suddenly appeared in the world one day. It declared that the greatest eccentric in martial history, the Heaven Chi master Changgi Jia, had hidden his martial arts somewhere on Mount Han. The message also mentioned a secret weapon he left behind. The words hinted that perhaps something long dormant was about to awaken again. The proclamation suggested that the entire Murim world would once again be thrown into turmoil. At the same time, on that same Mount Han, a tall, narrow peak stood deep within the forest. A thin pillar of light suddenly formed around it, spiraling upward with a sharp hum. The mountain trembled slightly as leaves rustled. The next second, that whole mountain was split apart into two. The whole mountain collapsed and hit the ground with force in a burst of white light and dust, shaking the rocks around it. Smoke spread across the ground, revealing an entrance in the rocky cliff. Through the swirling clouds, the shadow of a person slowly became visible, standing deep inside the newly opened cavern. Amid the mist, a long blade glimmered, gleaming coldly as it cut through the falling dust. Then a figure stepped forward. His face became clear as the wind swept past him. It was a black-haired young man in his 20s. He was our protagonist. He looked at the scene and spoke calmly, saying that light had finally appeared. Our protagonist stood firm among the shattered stones, his expression steady and unreadable. The man stepped out of the shattered cave and looked up at the open sky. He quietly noted to himself that the sky had always been blue. He wondered if the shock of leaving the cave was affecting him. Raising his hands slowly, he stared at his palm and thought about the strange emptiness inside his mind. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember the life he had lived before entering the cave. His expression darkened. Even so, he told himself he had to remember as much as possible. He reminded himself of the only purpose he could not forget, to exact revenge, no matter what. Our protagonist recalled his very first memory. In that memory, an old master stood before a group of children. With a hand on his chest, the old man introduced himself calmly. He said his name was Changgi Jia. Torches burned around him as he addressed the gathered children. He told them that they might not understand or believe what he was about to say, but in 10 years they must save the world. 100 children stood before him that day. Among those 100, our protagonist was one of them. He remembered the master's cold, piercing gaze. The master told them to obey his words. Then he added that martial training would begin the next day, so they should rest well for now. The children stood crowded together in the dimly lit cave. Back then, our protagonist felt no fear at all. Perhaps it was because he was an orphan. Changgi Jia turned back toward the children and spoke again. He said that for anyone thinking of escaping, he had something important to tell them. With a calm but sinister smile, he explained that the cave entrance had been sealed with a massive rock cliff. If anyone tried to intrude from outside, it would cause disaster. His tone made it clear that escape was impossible. From that moment on, the ordeal known as martial training began. Every part of their lives, eating, sleeping, and moving, was strictly controlled. The children had no freedom to act on their own. The first thing they learned was the method of breathing. It was called the Three Talents Mystic Art, a technique that absorbed both heavenly chi and earthly chi at the same time. They then learned how to wield a sword through the Three Talents sword technique, and how to move their bodies using Three Talents footwork. Under Changgi Jia's instruction, even the way they walked had to be trained and corrected. After about 3 years, Changgi Jia summoned them once again. He stood before the gathered children and spoke calmly. He told them that the martial arts he had taught them were techniques capable of reaching the realm of the martial god. Among the crowd, our protagonist listened quietly. Changgi Jia continued, saying that in the remaining 7 years, each of them had to perfect that art. He pointed toward a closed stone door and ordered all of them to enter, without leaving even one person behind. To prevent the world's calamity, he said, they had to train without fail. He added one more thing. Training would be done freely, in their own way. The door opened, and the children walked through it one by one. In the dim light, our protagonist's eyes narrowed as white mist drifted around his face, showing his silent determination. A firm realization settled within our protagonist. He now understood the truth. The reason they had been forced to survive that hellish place, everything they suffered, every moment, had been because of Changgi Jia. As the doors were closing, the last thing he saw was a shadowed image of Changgi Jia. The scene shifted to the sealed door deep inside the cave. As he commanded, all of them continued their training again and again in the depths of the cavern. Red mist swirled in the darkness. The fog that filled the cavern was actually condensed chi. Because of that dense chi, their martial arts grew stronger day by day. But the energy eventually became too much. It grew excessive, so overwhelming that even space itself began to twist and distort. Then one day, As one of the trainees turned his head toward the darkness, confusion appeared on his face. He stared as the air in front of them twisted and churned. A thick black fog surged outward. The other trainees stepped back, unease spreading among them. From within that fog, red lights flickered like pairs of eyes. One boy stuttered in fear, asking what that was. Then the creature stepped forward. A hulking beast with two skull-faced figures clinging to its sides. More shapes burst out behind it. Claws, fangs, and twisted bones filled the cavern. The monsters lunged forward as the trainees braced themselves. The ground shook when the massive creatures landed. The students were thrown back as the beasts crashed through the cavern like a living avalanche. On that very day, the gates of hell opened. Our protagonist at the front gripped his sword tightly. His voice rang through the chaos. He shouted for everyone to raise their swords. He charged forward, swinging his sword as bursts of purple energy exploded around him. Shards of light shot past while the trainees fought desperately behind him. Each day inside the cavern became more horrifying. One trainee forced his body downward in a fierce strike, his muscles trembling under the pressure. Another trainee unleashed a sweeping slash, a bright arc of light cutting through the darkness. All of them fought in a relentless struggle for survival. Yet, despite the terror, the martial arts Chungi Jia had taught them continued to grow. The 3 talents, mystic art. The 3 talents, sword technique. The 3 talents, footwork. Each skill advanced far beyond what they had achieved while training in the fog-filled cave. But in the end, except for one person, not a single trainee survived. The lone survivor, our protagonist, stood among the blood-soaked bodies and broken bones. Everyone else had fallen. Another wounded trainee lay on the ground, blood spreading beneath him. With the last of his strength, he whispered a single word to our protagonist, telling him to survive while calling his name Hyungwoo. The scene shifted to outside. Hyungwoo now walked through a quiet forest path, his cloak brushing against the grass. He answered calmly, saying that this was the name others used to call him. Dan Hyungwoo. The scene then shifted to a bustling city. Streets full of people, merchants, and guards moving along the stone-paved road. He walked deeper into the city, approaching a large structure marked as the Green Cloud Pavilion. Inside, the pavilion was full of noise. People ate, talked, and drank at wooden tables spread across the busy hall. Hyungwoo stepped through the doorway, the light falling across his face as he looked inside. A young woman with soft brown eyes turned her head slightly. She was Jo Seoyoung, daughter of the Jo clan, Lord of Henan. Her gaze sharpened, focusing on Hyungwoo across the room. On the other hand, a waiter came and welcomed Hyungwoo inside, showing him a seat. Just then, Solyong called her brother, who was sitting beside her, and told him to look at the person who had just entered. She pointed out that the newcomer was carrying a sword without a scabbard. The view shifted to the sword at the stranger's waist. The blade was fully exposed, her brother observed calmly. He remarked that the blade looked exceptional. He was Jo In, son of the Jo clan, Lord of Henan. Then a bowl of steaming noodles was placed on the table in front of Hyungwoo. The server smiled and told him to enjoy the meal. Hyungwoo sat quietly at the table, staring at the bowl placed before him. In his thoughts he wondered how long it had been since he had last seen proper food. He lifted the noodles with his chopsticks and brought them to his mouth. The moment he tasted them, his expression softened. The noodles slid smoothly as he ate, and he thought to himself that it was almost as though the food was melting away. Around him, customers began calling out to the staff. One man raised his hand, asking for a bowl of noodles. Another chimed in, saying he wanted one as well. Across the room, Jo Seoyoung watched in silence. A quiet question formed in her mind. She wondered why that person troubled her thoughts so much. Her eyes shifted away, yet she couldn't stop glancing back toward him as he continued eating alone. After finishing his meal, Hyungwoo lowered his chopsticks and spoke quietly, saying the food was delicious. The server brightened and asked if he enjoyed the meal. When he didn't respond right away, the server looked at him in confusion. The server then stated the price. He said the total would be 5 pun, and called out to him again. Hyungwoo repeated the word money, as it had been a long time since he had heard it. The room fell quiet for a moment, as Hyungwoo murmured to himself that he had forgotten. He sat alone at the table, and nodded slightly, realizing that it was money he had forgotten. The server wiped sweat from his face, and spoke with a strained smile, telling Hyungwoo that this would not do. Since he had eaten, he had to pay. Hyungwoo calmly replied that he didn't have any money. Hearing that, the server sighed in disbelief, calling him bold. He pointed at Hyungwoo's waist, and said that if he had no money, then at least he should hand over the sword he carried. Hyungwoo's eyes narrowed. He stated firmly that he could not give away the sword. He touched the weapon at his side and explained that it was a sword exchanged for the life of his last friend. Hearing that, the server's expression twisted with anger. He shouted loudly, demanding to know if Hyung-woo had planned to eat for free from the very beginning. The atmosphere in the tavern shifted as several armed men stepped forward, surrounding the area with hostile intent. Their footsteps echoed across the wooden floor as they closed in. But suddenly, Jo-in looked up in alarm and shouted for his sister, Yona, who ran toward Hyung-woo. Before the situation could escalate, her soft voice interrupted. A calm hand extended a small pouch of money. Yona stepped forward and asked them not to scold Hyung-woo so harshly. She smiled gently and said she would pay on his behalf. The server accepted the pouch awkwardly, scratching his head and muttering that he should have thanked her properly. Yona then stood in front of Hyung-woo, looking up at him without saying a word. As the room's tension slowly faded around them, Hyung-woo froze for a moment, staring blankly as a thought surfaced in his mind. He wondered if the girl had truly paid for him. He felt that there should be something one was meant to say in a moment like this, yet no words came to him. Yena studied him quietly. Seeing him up close, she became certain of something. His eyes reminded her of a child seeing the world for the very first time. He parted his lips as if to speak, but nothing came out. Then he suddenly turned and began walking away. Yena looked confused. She watched his back as he left, convinced he had been just about to say something. Across the room, others watched in disbelief. Someone stammered in surprise, wondering aloud why he was simply leaving. They couldn't believe that he had gone without even offering a word of thanks. Then Jo-in stepped closer to Yona, crossing his arms. He called Hyung-woo a wandering swordsman who knew no gratitude. But Yona told her brother that it seemed Hyung-woo truly had no money at all. Jo-in tilted his head and asked if that was the only reason. Judging from Hyung-woo's appearance, he didn't seem to possess any inner force either. Yona listened quietly, but her thoughts drifted elsewhere. She remembered the sword at Hyung-woo's side. In her mind, it had been remarkable, far too fine to belong to someone ordinary. As she replayed everything, a sudden realization made her eyes widen. She said that even with a single glance, she had recognized it as a famed sword. She grew worried, thinking that if Hyung-woo walked around with such a weapon, and without a scabbard, it could invite trouble from anyone looking to test their strength or steal it. Determined, she turned toward the door. She told herself she needed to follow him immediately. She couldn't simply ignore it. He clearly needed a proper scabbard. On the other hand, outside, Hyung-woo walked through the open streets. He paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. Since she had paid for his food, he felt a tug of responsibility. His expression softened as he thought about her. He murmured to himself that he should have thanked her. On the other hand, the reason why Yona was at the Green Cloud Pavilion, it all happened half an hour ago before Hyung-woo arrived there. Inside, the Green Cloud Pavilion halls were crowded. Disciples in blue robes gathered around tables, the whole building filled with noise and conversation. From above, the scene looked even livelier. Warriors talking, laughing, and taking their seats. Looking at all that, Yana commented that the prestige of the Murim alliance was truly astonishing. She was worried, and noted that Changsha was filled to the brim with Murim alliance fighters. Across from her, her brother Jo-in held a cup and added his own thoughts. He said it was remarkable, and admitted he never imagined the alliance leader himself would mobilize personally. An older man with a gray beard spoke next. He explained that the reason was likely the movement of the Sado alliance and the Green Forest bandits, who were heading toward Mount Han. This man was Sama Chol, head of the Hainan Escort Bureau under the Jo clan estate. He acknowledged the point, though he added that such a massive number of people following along could only be explained by the master's reputation. A bead of sweat slid down his face as he considered it. He was known throughout Murim as the greatest eccentric master in history. Cheonggija. Stories surrounded him. It was said he possessed extraordinary insight, along with countless mechanisms and formations of his own creation. He was reputed to wield formidable martial skill and to have a profound understanding of heavenly chi. In those later years, he created a martial art known as Flashing Shadow Blade, a technique powerful enough to shake the entire world. Using mechanisms and formations woven together into a single method, Cheonggija passed his martial arts to a wandering swordsman. In only 3 short years, he had gone from an unknown third-rate wanderer to a true absolute master, but his rise ended in tragedy. That same warrior was later branded a public enemy of Murim. Surrounded by weapons and arrows, he died a miserable death on the ground. Yet his downfall only drew even more attention toward Cheonggija. After that, countless martial factions began searching for the eccentric master. But Cheonggija suddenly vanished without leaving a single trace. Sima Chou thought that a martial manual containing Cheonggija's arts had recently been discovered by the Zhou clan lord. Because of that, it was natural that all of Murim would covet it. He told Yuna and Zhou In that at the Zhou clan lord's request, he was accompanying the group, so no grave trouble should occur. Still, he warned Yuna to act with the utmost caution. He told her that in this world, there were times when completely unforeseen events unfolded. Just as he said that, from behind Yuna, Hyungwoo entered the Green Cloud Pavilion. And now, in the present, as Yuna said that she wanted to follow Hyungwoo, Zhou In declared that he opposed her intention to follow the wandering swordsman. He told her the swordsman had no connection to her at all. He added that the man lacked propriety and courtesy, and that any goodwill she showed him would only be wasted. She tried to protest, but her voice faltered. Sima Chou then spoke up as well. He said he agreed with the young Zhou's view. Leaving the group to wander alone would be far too dangerous right now. Besides, he reminded her, the alliance leader was expected to arrive soon. Hearing both of them, Yana lowered her gaze in silence. After a moment she replied quietly, saying she understood and would abide by their wishes. Meanwhile, outside in the busy marketplace, Hyungwoo moved through the crowd, wrapped in a dark cloak. He walked alone among the people, unaware of the discussion happening behind him. In the busy street market, a merchant stated his price. He said it would cost 5 nyang. The customer bowed slightly and asked if a small discount could be given. Nearby, another man played a flute, drawing a cheerful crowd. People clapped along, enjoying the performance. Hyungwoo watched the scene quietly. He looked around at the peaceful atmosphere and murmured to himself how calm everything felt. As he continued walking, he noticed a woman and a young boy at a fabric stall. The vendors seemed excited as he showed them his goods. The boy happily received a roll of fabric, thanking his mother with a bright smile. She gently patted his head in return. Hyungwoo lifted his head slightly, his eyes softening as he took in the lively marketplace around him. For a moment, he seemed to appreciate the ordinary warmth of the world. Watching all this, suddenly a memory flashed before Hyungwoo's eyes. It was the time when he was trapped inside that cave along with other children, fighting monsters. Hyungwoo and a red-haired boy stood surrounded by monstrous creatures crawling around them. The red-haired boy spoke firmly, telling Hyungwoo that they had to escape this place no matter what. He said that once they left, they should try all the things they never had the chance to do before. Hyungwoo answered with a quiet agreement. As they continued walking, the red-haired boy asked for one more promise. Hyungwoo turned his head slightly and asked what it was. The red-haired boy told him that if he managed to get out, he should visit his home and deliver a message to his father. This boy's name was Aksegi. Hyungwoo lowered his gaze and told him to go out and tell his father himself. Aksegi laughed, agreeing. He said he would deliver the message with his own mouth. His expression turned serious for a moment. He looked at Hyungwoo and told him not to die. Amid the chaos of battle, blades flashed through the darkness as the two boys fought their way through the monsters. Hyungwoo spoke with determination, saying they should survive today as well. Hyungwoo walked ahead, unaware of the danger behind him. Aksegi froze as a shadow fell over Hyungwoo. A monstrous maw lunged down toward him from above. Aksegi screamed for him to watch out. Hyungwoo reacted too late, his expression tightening in shock as the attack closed in. A sharp sound followed, and a violent burst of blood splattered across the cavern. When the dust settled, Aksegi was shown collapsing forward, blood pouring from his body. Hyungwoo stood behind him with his sword lowered, his face full of disbelief, as Aksegi fell into his arms. After killing that monster, Hyungwoo knelt beside Aksegi's fallen body, his voice shaking as he asked why. He cried out, asking why Aksegi had acted in his place, why it had to be him instead. He tried to shake him awake, begging him to get up. Tears filled his eyes as he reminded Aksegi that they were supposed to meet his father together. Aksegi slowly opened his eyes, his voice weak. He told Hyungwoo that among all of them, Hyungwoo had been the strongest. He urged him to survive, to live, and to deliver his final message. He asked Hyungwoo to tell his father that he was sorry. Hyungwoo remembered the friends who once stood beside him, their lives now gone. Under the bright moonlight, his thoughts echoed that his freedom had been bought with 99 lives. Hyungwoo looked ahead with a soft, sorrowful expression. He whispered that he was indebted to them all. Under the bright moonlight, Hyungwoo stood with his back to the night sky. He made a quiet promise. He vowed that he would settle this debt with Cheongbukjai. His footsteps echoed softly as he walked across the stone floor. Lost in thought, he realized he had wandered back to the same place again. He stopped in front of the wooden building, recognizing that it was the Green Cloud Pavilion. But before he could return, something caught his eye. He turned slightly in surprise. Through the narrow gap of the door, he saw Yun inside. She was still there. He remembered that he had never thanked her properly, but suddenly voices came from inside. Someone ordered everyone to reach Mount Heng and lodge in the next village. Everyone acknowledged the command. The next second, a large group of men marched out of the pavilion building, their expressions stern and focused. They moved in tight formation, every step filled with purpose. At the front, 2 men led the group. One of the leaders spoke calmly, saying that if they traveled without resting, they would reach their destination in a single day. He ordered everyone to keep up the pace. The group answered loudly in unison. In the next moment, they all burst into motion, sprinting across the courtyard with incredible speed as energy flared behind them. Watching them leave, Hyungwoo looked on quietly under the moonlight, his expression unreadable. Young also hurried through the streets, moving in the same direction as the departing group. Standing high above the city, Hyungwoo observed the long road ahead. He realized that Yeon was heading toward the same place as well. Hyungwoo also moved from there, wondering where that group was heading. The night sky stretched endlessly overhead, filled with stars and drifting clouds. Deep in the forest, the marching group slowed. Their leader announced that they would rest first at the foothills of Mount Hen. Watching from a distance, Hyungwoo gazed quietly. He questioned whether they were truly heading toward the same place he had emerged from. He noticed more movement. Another group, one that had been trailing behind, also seemed to be heading in the same direction. He wondered what they were all searching for. Farther ahead in the woods, 2 men discussed troubling news. The Sado Alliance and the Green Forest were making sudden moves. The older man said such movements always signaled danger. The other replied that those groups were racing toward a goal completely opposite to their own. An elderly Zugi Jungdyan, who was the strategist of the Murim Alliance, spoke calmly, assuring the alliance leader that nothing would happen and that he should not worry too much. The alliance leader, Doko-un, stroked his beard thoughtfully. He wondered aloud if his instincts had grown dull. Elsewhere, Miss Jo let out a tired breath as the group moved through the forest. Pang Cholyong, blushing slightly, stepped closer and asked if she wished to rest. He was the vice commander of the Rising Dragon Division of the Murim Alliance. He offered to inform the alliance leader on her behalf. But Jo-in stepped forward, politely refusing the idea. He said it was unnecessary, and that he would handle things himself. But before anyone could respond, a rough voice echoed from the trees. A muscular man with a fierce appearance emerged from the shadows, flanked by others. He stared straight ahead and said he had finally found them, a sinister smile stretching across his face. He declared that he had at last found the Murim Alliance. It was So Hyaogui, the lesser mountain stronghold chief of the Green Forest. He stood confidently with his men behind him. He mocked the alliance, saying they had hidden themselves well. The Murim Alliance leader immediately drew his sword and called out for everyone to prepare themselves. Zhu Gyenchan warned the alliance leader to stay alert. He noted with concern that even the Sado Alliance had joined forces. His gaze sharpened as he assessed the threat. Alliance leader Doko-un silently acknowledged the danger. He recognized that So Hyaogui was no ordinary opponent. In his mind, he admitted the man was far from a trifling master. While he was thinking that, the tension broke in an instant. Su Hong Hyaogui rushed forward with brutal force, shouting if the righteous faction was ready to taste blood. His attack tore through the formation, blades clashing and sparks flying as the battle exploded around them. So Hyaogui charged through the formation with brutal speed. His legs swept upward, sending a Murim Alliance soldier flying as dirt and debris scattered around him. He landed among the defenders like a beast, his fist already swinging. Several men cried out in panic as his attacks crashed into them. Blood sprayed into the air as one after another fell under his blows. Su Hong, Longji didn't slow down. He leaped forward again, delivering a powerful kick straight into another man's chest. The impact sent the soldier twisting backward as more blood burst from his mouth. In the chaos, 2 more alliance members were struck down, collapsing as dark streams of blood spilled from their lips. The forest floor shook from the force of the ongoing assault. Then, in the midst of the slaughter, he landed on the ground with calm precision. Su Hong Barakaldwi looked over the battlefield with a cruel grin. With bodies falling around him, he muttered that the small fry were already finished. On the other hand, a sharp blade cut through the chaos. Doko-un rushed forward, slicing down the attackers in a single clean motion, blood spraying in his wake. Seo Hyoli's eyes widened with excitement. He roared Doko-un's name, his voice echoing through the forest as he charged straight at him. The 2 figures leapt toward each other, one with a heavy blade raised high, the other bracing his stance. Their swords clashed violently, sending shockwaves of light and force between the trees. Around them, the battle only grew bloodier. Another enemy fighter swung his blade down, cutting through Murim Alliance members as they struggled to hold the line. The Murim Alliance leader held his sword up, sweat forming on his brow as he looked around the chaotic battlefield. Behind him, his people were struggling, surrounded on all sides. He clenched his teeth and muttered that they were outnumbered. Seo Hyogui stepped forward with a mocking smile. He told the alliance leader that he looked overwhelmed. Then he leaned in closer, saying that Cheonggija's secret weapon belonged to them. From the shadows, Hyung-woo lifted his head when he heard that name, his expression sharpening. The next second, he stepped forward and drove his sword straight into a rock on the ground. The impact cracked the rock and sent debris flying upward. Pieces of rock shot into the air as his power spread across the ground. He jumped high above the battlefield, rising past the shattered rocks. Below him, the alliance leader looked up in shock as Hyung-woo descended from above, sword in hand, ready to strike. Hyung-woo dropped from the sky like a falling star, his blade tracing a bright cross of light through the air. Cracks spread across the ground as stones burst upward around him. Seo Hyogui tried to shield himself, but the shockwave struck before he could react. Rocks smashed into his body, and blood splattered as he was thrown backward, gritting his teeth in pain. Hyung-woo continued his descent, cutting through enemies as he passed them. Bodies flew away from the impact zone, their silhouettes thrown into the glowing explosion beneath him. He landed with a violent crash, the sword's energy ripping through the earth and scattering debris in every direction. The ground shook as the attack tore through the battlefield. Dust slowly settled. Hyung-woo stood at the center of the destruction, his eyes glowing faintly as he lifted his head. The Murim Alliance fighters stared at him with wide eyes, shocked by the overwhelming power they had just witnessed. Their leader looked up in awe. Even Yeon beside him froze, unable to look away from the figure who had turned the tide of battle in a single strike. The surviving fighters stared upward, their faces pale and stunned. Sweat ran down their cheeks as they tried to process the power they had just witnessed. From across the battlefield, Hyung-woo's voice rose, demanding to know where Cheonggija was. Everyone turned toward the group of Murim warriors gathering around the swordsman. The Murim Alliance leader stood there in disbelief. Thoughts raced through his mind. He hadn't sensed Hyung-woo's presence at all, not even for a moment. As the Alliance leader, such a thing should have been impossible. He stepped closer and spoke, thanking the mysterious swordsman, but asking why he was searching for Cheonggija in this place. With a heavy expression, he began to reveal the truth. Cheonggija had been dead for 10 years. Hyung-woo stood frozen, repeating the words he had just heard. His voice trembled as he asked if Cheonggija was dead. His thoughts echoed in the darkness. He had not yet taken revenge. He had yet to make Cheonggija pay for the lives of his friends. Hyung-woo was too stunned and whispered a single word, almost emotionless, dead. Suddenly, green mist-like energy swirled around his body. He lowered his head slightly, unaware of the power gathering around him. The soldiers nearby watched in confusion as the strange aura wrapped around his form. As that green aura hit them, one of the men let out a soft groan, half-conscious, reacting to the growing pressure in the air. Though even Hyung-woo himself was unaware, at this very moment, the aura of void flowed from his body. The aura spreading from Hyung-woo's body washed across the battlefield. It plunged the surrounding Murim Alliance warriors into sudden paralysis, leaving them frozen in a haze of loss and desolation. Hyung-woo's eyes burned with anger as he thought that, after enduring ages of hardship and barely escaping that hell, the object of his vengeance had vanished. Blood-stained memories surged, voices of dying comrades calling out through the bloody darkness, asking Hyung-woo to please deliver news of them to their families. Hyung-woo imagined himself lying on the ground. Bodies lay scattered in the crimson void, as a voice whispered, telling Hyung-woo to take revenge for those who died unjustly. Back in the present, the Murim Alliance leader stared at the swirling energy around Hyung-woo, realizing that this energy was void chi. His expression tightened with urgency as he assessed the situation. If this continued, the entirety of the Murim Alliance might fall into chi deviation. He reached for his sword, declaring that he had to cut Hyung-woo down before it was too late. But just then, a soft voice reached Hyung-woo as green mist drifted around him. A girl stepped forward and asked if he was all right. He turned slightly, looking at her through the fading glow. It was Seo-yeon. When Hyung-woo saw her, he immediately recognized her. He came back to his senses, remembering that he had come here following the girl who had shown him kindness. He then remembered a scene from his past, where one of his dying friends held out a sword with trembling hands, asking Hyung-woo to accept his sword. Another man urged him to live. Remembering that, Hyung-woo realized that the reason he survived and emerged alive was because of their goodwill. Hyung-woo lowered his gaze, thinking that now that Cheonggija had vanished, and vengeance was denied to him, what he must do next. He looked upward, the mist softly disappearing around him. He decided he would go and find them now. Around him, as the Murim warriors returned to their senses, they blinked in confusion. One man gasped, asking what had happened. The overwhelming lethargy had disappeared. Another looked at him, surprised that he felt the same. The Murim alliance leader stared upward in shock as the dark mist around them faded. He whispered that the void chi had ceased. Even seasoned masters struggled to escape such a force. Yet it had simply vanished. A troubled thought echoed in his mind. He wondered just what the young man's true identity was. Hyung-woo lowered his gaze slightly, his eyes reflecting a quiet glow. Then he looked at Yeon standing beside him. Yeon faced him with calm curiosity. She asked if he was perhaps searching for someone. Beside her, her uncle Sama waited silently. Yeon gently called her uncle and explained that this gentleman before them had aided them. So while blushing, she suggested that until he found the person he was searching for, perhaps he could travel with them. Her uncle Sama beside her paused for a moment as he considered her request. Sama looked at the Murim alliance leader and thought that it was difficult to refuse someone who had helped them. But the Murim alliance strategist Zuji had nearly fallen prey to void chi. Would the alliance leader allow it? Hearing Yeon, the Murim alliance leader lowered his gaze, thinking deeply. He thought that Hyung-woo before them was strong enough to cleave through both the Green Forest and the Sado alliance rabble in a single exchange. Looking at his men, he thought that since their numbers were already diminished, it might be wiser to keep him close rather than let him roam freely. The Murim alliance leader finally raised his hand and declared that he would approve it. Hearing that, Hyung-woo looked at Yeon and her uncle Sama, his sword still lowered at his side. After getting approval from the Murim alliance leader, Sama then turned to Hyung-woo and asked if he would be willing to work once at the escort bureau. Hearing that, the surrounding members murmured among themselves. One of them repeated the question, working at the strict Henan escort bureau. Another noted that such an offer was quite significant. But Hyung-woo's eyes narrowed slightly as he admitted he was not certain. Hearing that, Hyung-woo's brother Jo-in stepped forward and spoke sharply. He reminded Hyung-woo that the Henan escort bureau was not a place open to just anyone. Questioning whether he was truly refusing such an opportunity, Hyung-woo looked at them calmly and said that even if he wished to give an answer, he did not know what an escort bureau was. His words stunned the group. Uncle Sama reacted in disbelief, asking what he had said. Young quickly stepped forward, saying she would explain. She nervously described that an escort bureau was a place that transported commissioned goods and protected the client. Young-woo nodded lightly and replied that he understood. Meanwhile, Uncle Sama, standing behind, looked troubled after hearing Hyung-woo and wondered if this was truly the right choice. Not far away, two men watched with narrowed eyes. One of them gritted his teeth, asking where this rustic bumpkin had come from. But the other man focused on something else. He glanced at the sword in Hyung-woo's hand and smirked. His companion called him Brother Peng, asking if he sensed it as well. Their eyes fell on the blade. A cold aura pulsed from it, trembling faintly in the night air. They noted that the killing intent coming from that sword was anything but ordinary. Both of them watched Hyung-woo from a distance. One of them clicked his tongue, mocking how such a famed sword could rest on the waist of a country bumpkin. The other agreed. He said that a sword of that level required not only a scabbard, but an owner worthy of its stature. A faint smile curved on the first man's lips. He said that for now there were too many watching eyes. The second man nodded, as the plan formed between them. They decided to wait until the alliance leader and the division heads entered Mount Heng. Sometime later, morning light broke across the mountains, casting golden rays over the forest. The scene shifted to the towering peaks of Mount Heng, from where Hyung-woo had come out. The escort group gathered below the mountain. Uncle Sama looked up and remarked that this was Mount Heng. He added that the place felt rather eerie. Around him, disciples exchanged nervous glances. Amid the crowd, Hyung-woo stood silently, his expression calm as he observed the mountain before him. He looked ahead at the towering peak, finally realizing that this was the place everyone had been searching for. Not far away, the Murim alliance leader smiled with anticipation. He wondered aloud if they would finally witness Cheonggi-ja's secret manual, but his excitement faded slightly as the Murim alliance strategist, Zhuge, admitted the problem. Despite their efforts, they could not locate the entrance to the cave. All around the cliffside, disciples clung to the rocks, climbing desperately. They shouted that the entrance was nowhere in sight. Walking behind the two elders, Hyung-woo listened silently. The Murim alliance strategist Zugi muttered that if they delayed any longer, they might have to carve through the mountain itself. But the alliance leader said that doing so might damage Cheonggi-ja's manual. Hyungwoo lowered his gaze in quiet thought. He recalled that the place from which he had emerged had already collapsed. Because of this, they would need to find Cheonggi-ja's true entrance instead. A location where the old master's chi could still be faintly sensed. He lifted his eyes toward the mountain once more, and immediately saw purple mist coiling out from the cracks in the stone. Hyungwoo sensed it at once and murmured that the place was there. In the next moment, he dashed forward. The disciples around him watched in shock as he shot past them like a streak of wind. Several of them looked up as he leapt toward the cliffside, their eyes widening as he soared above their heads. He landed lightly on the rocks where the purple mist was coming out, standing before that dark crevice veiled in shadow. He looked back and told everyone that the entrance was there. Below, the Alliance leader and his strategists stared in disbelief. The Alliance leader asked if Hyungwoo actually knew the paths of this place. Hyungwoo looked toward the dark stone wall and spoke quietly. He said that this was the place where he had once lived. Hearing that, Yeon lifted her head in surprise, unable to hide her confusion. She repeated his words softly, wondering if he truly meant here. Behind her, disciple Peng smirked, saying it was just as he had expected. Peng and his friend whispered among themselves. They mocked Hyungwoo, calling him someone who had lived in the mountains like a wild beast. They laughed, saying that it explained why he carried his sword so poorly, without even a scabbard. Ignoring their chatter, the Alliance leader stepped forward with authority. He declared that the search party would be formed from himself, the strategist, and the heads of both the Azure Dragon Division and the Rising Dragon Division. He ordered that the Black Tortoise Hall secure the perimeter. The disciples straightened immediately and responded in unison, obeying the command. As the commotion settled, the Alliance leader approached Hyungwoo. With a sincere expression, he bowed slightly, and told him that they remained indebted to him. They offered their thanks, but with a calm expression, Hyungwoo told them that there was nothing inside. He looked back at the cave, and in his mind, repeated the truth. Within the cave lay nothing. Nothing except the shadows of a past filled with death. The place held no treasure, no secrets, only the remnants of suffering. His eyes lowered slightly, a faint glow of red flickering across his face as the images grew darker around him. Behind him, the Alliance leader felt uneasy. He thought that Hyungwoo seemed more unsettled than before, though he wondered if it was simply his imagination. He placed a steady hand on Hyungwoo's shoulder, and said that they would take over. He asked Hyungwoo not to involve himself any further, saying that the Alliance leader's group turned away from the cavern. The Alliance leader called out for them to leave. Hyungwoo looked at them from behind, his expression calm and unreadable. As he walked beneath the morning sky, his thoughts echoed quietly. With Cheonggi-ja dead and gone, whatever happened here was no longer his concern. Suddenly, footsteps sounded in front of him, light and quick. It was Yan who approached him. She looked around the area with wide eyes and asked if he had truly lived there. Hyungwoo paused and gave her a small nod in response. But just then, Peng and his companion hurried past Yeon, their movements swift and urgent. Yeon glanced at them as the group rushed forward, their steps cutting through the air. As they moved, Hyungwoo's eyes narrowed sharply, sensing the shift in intent ahead. Yeon, behind them, shouted in alarm, asking what they were doing. Peng pushed forward and claimed there was no guarantee Hyungwoo was not a spy from the Green Forest. Yeon argued back, reminding him that Hyungwoo had saved them from the Green Forest bandits. But the accusation continued, asking how they could be certain it was not all staged. Peng stepped closer with a cold expression, and said that if Hyungwoo was truly innocent, then he should hand over his sword. Peng added that they would keep it safe for him. Peng studied the weapon carefully. Seeing it up close made things clearer. At a glance, the sword looked like a worn, unimpressive old blade. But the killing intent seeping from it was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. Hearing that, Hyungwoo tightened his grip on the sword at his waist. He looked toward the group, and asked calmly if they were truly telling him to hand the weapon over. Peng smirked, replying that if he understood, he should surrender it immediately. Nearby, Yeon watched everything with concern. Hyungwoo explained that the sword had been entrusted to him by a fallen friend. He grabbed his sword and said that he had no intention of giving it to anyone. Not now, and not until the day he died. The man in red let out a low chuckle, clearly amused by the situation. Standing behind him, Peng Yun fell silent. Her expression showed worry as she watched the tension rising between both sides. Footsteps echoed across the rocky ground as Peng and his companion began to move. Seeing that, Hyungwoo's gaze sharpened. He closed his eyes and imagined a scenario. In an instant, he understood their intentions. One of them would circle behind him to launch a surprise attack. At the same time, the other would move forward to apply pressure from the front. Inside his mind, he quickly analyzed their movements. The two attackers would rush down the rocky slope toward him. They were planning to attack together. Seeing their formation, Hyungwoo immediately decided on his response. If that was the case, he would duck their attack and cut them down in the same motion. Hyungwoo lowered his body slightly as he opened his eyes, tracking every movement. In front, Peng and his companion believed they had him cornered. The man in red even smirked confidently, certain the trap would work. But Hyungwoo remained completely composed as both enemies closed in from different directions. Just as he thought, the two of them rushed down the steep rocky slope toward him. As they closed in, Peng shouted a warning. He told Hyungwoo that if he handed the sword over right now, he could avoid getting hurt. However, Hyungwoo showed no reaction. His hand slowly moved toward the hilt of his sword. A faint aura gathered around him as he prepared to draw his weapon. His eyes narrowed slightly, glowing with cold determination. Just as the tension in the air rose, a loud voice suddenly interrupted the scene. It was the Murim alliance leader, who shouted angrily for them to stop. He scolded them, reminding them that they had been told to keep watch. He demanded to know what they thought they were doing right now. Hearing the voice, Peng and his companion froze in place. They turned in shock and immediately realized that the alliance leader had arrived. The alliance leader stood at the front of the cave gate, watching from the ground. Everyone had the same thought, whether they had found it, whether they had discovered Chiengija's secret weapon. Everyone looked at the alliance leader nervously, waiting for him to say something. After a brief moment, the alliance leader spoke. He declared that they were finished here, and ordered everyone to withdraw. Immediately, the men below responded respectfully. They answered loudly that they understood and would follow his command. As the group began to retreat down the mountain, Peng and his companion glanced back at Hyungwoo. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, Peng muttered that Hyungwoo should consider himself lucky this time. As they left, Yun hurried over and looked at Hyungwoo with concern, asking if he was okay. Hyungwoo glanced at her calmly. Inside his mind, he wondered what she actually meant by asking if he was okay. Seeing that he seemed unharmed, Yun let out a small sigh of relief. She said that it was good because she had been worried about him. Then she suddenly remembered something. With a slightly embarrassed smile, she mentioned that they didn't even know each other's names yet. She introduced herself first, saying that her name was Jo Seoyeon. Hyungwoo looked at her for a moment, before answering calmly. He introduced himself as Dan Hyungwoo. Hearing his name, Jo Seoyeon repeated it softly. Looking up at him with bright eyes, she smiled and said that it was a nice name. Jo Seoyeon smiled gently and called out to Dan Hyungwoo. She told him to come along because they needed to prepare to head back. Not long after, the Murim Alliance's expedition to uncover Chiengija's secret weapon came to an end, at least for the time being. Far away, in Hubei province, news about the expedition began spreading among the people. Some martial artists talked excitedly, saying they had heard that the Murim Alliance had discovered Chiengija's secret weapon. Another person laughed and said that if that was true, it would only be a matter of time before the Murim Alliance ruled the entire world. Others listening nearby grew curious. One person wondered what this so-called secret weapon actually was. Another replied that there was no way for outsiders to know, since the Murim Alliance had already hidden it away. As these conversations continued, rumors about the Murim Alliance began spreading farther and farther across the land. Soon the whispers of this mysterious weapon reached even the Murim Alliance's main headquarters. Inside the Murim Alliance headquarters, anger suddenly erupted. The alliance leader slammed his fist onto the table and shouted that the situation was ridiculous. With a frustrated expression, he said that no one would believe them even if they explained that there was no such thing as Chiengija's secret weapon. This was the Murim Alliance Elder Council meeting, where several elders sat around a large round table, discussing the spreading rumors. One of the elders calmly asked the alliance leader if he thought that was the only problem. He explained that the rumors had already crossed Wuhan and were now spreading throughout all of Hubei province. The alliance leader spoke with a serious expression. He revealed that when they explored the cave at Hyungsan, the only thing they had found was a wooden box that appeared to have been left behind by Chiengjia. Inside the box was nothing but a letter. The elders examined the letter that had been found with the wooden box. One of the elders frowned as he read the strange characters written on the paper. Confused, he wondered what in the world the writing actually meant. As he continued reading, a particular phrase caught his attention. The letter spoke of something called the blood demon being. According to the message, the blood demon being was a figure destined to shake the entire era. It was someone who would throw the whole Jianghu into chaos. Chungija explained the reason behind the wooden box. To prevent this disaster, he had trained 100 peerless martial masters. He begged whoever discovered the letter to use those warriors to stop the blood demon being. However, there was another crucial instruction. To control those powerful martial masters, something extremely important was required. Inside the wooden box was an object meant for that purpose. It was the yin-yang parasite, which was said to be absolutely necessary to control the martial masters. Chungija swore that the blood demon being would never succeed. No matter what happened, he believed that the blood demon being would never get his way. After reading the letter, the elders slowly opened the wooden box that had been left behind. Inside it was something strange. Resting within the box was the yin-yang parasite. A faint mist swirled around the object as the box opened, revealing a strange creature sealed inside a transparent sphere. The elders studied it carefully. He remarked that it was already shocking enough that the yin-yang parasite described in the letter had never been seen before. However, something else was even more puzzling. There was no trace at all of the 100 martial masters mentioned in the letter. Because of that, doubt began to rise. One of the men questioned how much of this story they were actually supposed to believe. Another person asked directly whether that meant the entire letter was simply nonsense. But the alliance leader did not agree with that conclusion. Instead, he calmly explained that it felt as though some hidden force was working behind everything that had happened. The Murim alliance strategist calmly explained that there were actually several reasons to suspect that something strange was happening. He addressed the alliance leader and began with the first point. At Hyungsan, the situation with the Green Forest bandits had always felt suspicious. According to what they discovered, Chunjija was not meant to be the bandits' secret weapon. Instead, everything seemed aimed at harming the Murim alliance itself. The alliance leader agreed, saying that when they finally arrived at Hyungshan to investigate, they could not find a single remaining trace of the bandits. Even more disturbing was the fact that many of the corpses had already disappeared, which only made the situation more suspicious. Then there were the rumors spreading throughout the marketplaces. Those rumors kept growing bigger and bigger, just like a snowball rolling down a mountain. The alliance leader concluded that this entire situation looked like a deliberate plan. Someone was clearly trying to draw the attention of the entire Jianghu toward the Murim alliance. Hearing this explanation, one of the elders became shocked. He stammered in disbelief and asked who could possibly be behind something like this. The alliance strategist began explaining his thoughts step by step. First, he said they should suspect the Zhou clan head, the man who had originally brought them the map. However, another person quickly responded with hesitation. He pointed out that Zhou Ilhyun, the Zhou clan head, might not actually be that kind of man. Even so, the alliance leader continued his reasoning. He suggested that even if the Zhou clan head himself was innocent, there could still be a spy hiding somewhere within the Zhou clan. Because the situation had become extremely serious, the alliance leader insisted that they should send someone capable to secretly watch over the Zhou clan. He thought that even if the Zhou clan was not the true mastermind behind everything, there was still another possibility. It was possible that traitors were secretly using the Zhou clan without their knowledge. The scene then shifted to the entrance of the Zhou clan estate, where the news spread quickly among the guards that the escort agency head had returned. When the group arrived at the Zhou clan estate, someone welcomed them and calmly said that they had returned safely. Hyungwoo looked up at the large estate in front of him and asked if this was the young lady's home. As he examined the surroundings, he quietly noted how big the place was. The escort agency head stated that he needed to meet the Zhou clan head immediately. After thinking for a moment, he added that they should first take Hyungwoo to the Henan escort agency. Hyungwoo glanced around the estate, silently observing the unfamiliar place. At the same time, Jo Seo looked at him with a slightly regretful expression. She explained that she had wanted to get him a scabbard on the way there, but unfortunately they had not been able to do so. She softly commented that it was a shame. Hearing that, Hyungwoo quietly thought to himself that people in the outside world seemed strangely obsessed with scabbards. Jo Seoyeon calmly observed the sword at Hyungwoo's side and concluded that no matter how good a scabbard might be, it would never be able to withstand the killing intent contained within that sword. Just as she said that, a sharp sound rang out as the scabbard suddenly shattered into pieces, unable to endure the pressure from the blade. Seeing this, Hyungwoo simply smiled faintly and said that, as expected, it seemed he would not need a scabbard after all. Jo Seo-young, standing beside him, looked surprised upon hearing that. Then she lowered her gaze and apologized, saying she was sorry for saying that she would make him a scabbard. Hearing her apology, Hyungwoo looked slightly puzzled when she said sorry. A memory surfaced in his mind. In that memory, his friend, lying on the ground, looked up weakly and apologized, saying he was sorry to Hyungwoo. Thinking back to that moment, Hyungwoo remembered that his friend had said the same words back then, but something about it never made sense to him. His friend had been the one dying, so Hyungwoo wondered why he had been the one apologizing. Standing quietly, Hyungwoo asked himself what exactly his friend had been sorry for. Then he spoke firmly. He told her not to ever say she was sorry to him. His expression hardened as he said he never wanted to hear those words again. Jo Seo looked up in shock, startled by his sudden reaction. After a moment, she lowered her voice and said that she understood. Just then, the escort agency head suddenly called out loudly from nearby. He shouted for Hyungwoo to come over immediately. Hyungwoo quietly walked away, leaving Jo Seolyeon standing behind him. Watching him go, she hesitated for a moment and wondered if she had said something wrong. The scene then shifted to the Hainan escort agency, where workers were busy moving cargo under the night sky. Someone shouted loudly, reminding the workers to be careful not to let anything fall. Observing the situation, Hyungwoo calmly noted that the work looked like that of a porter. A porter, he understood, was simply a laborer who carried baggage for an escort agency. Nearby, a worker struggled as he carried a heavy wooden crate. At that moment, the escort agency head raised his voice and called out to someone named Jung Chil. He shouted that he had brought a new porter and instructed Jung Chil to take care of the newcomer and personally train him. Jung Chil, a muscular man, glanced over his shoulder after hearing the announcement. With a curious look, he muttered that a newbie had arrived. Then he grinned confidently and responded that he understood the order. He told the agency head to leave the newcomer to him. Watching him, the agency head quietly thought that Jung Chil seemed slightly rough. Still, he hoped that nothing troublesome would happen. Turning to Hyungwoo beside him, the agency head spoke calmly. He told Hyungwoo to learn properly from Jung Chil. Hyungwoo did not respond and simply remained silent. The agency head stepped away, adding that Hyungwoo should take care and wishing him good luck. After that, Jung Chil spoke again with a sharp smile. He warned that even if Hyungwoo was a newbie personally brought by the agency head, he would make no exceptions for him. Jung Chil stepped closer to Hyungwoo and looked down at him with a mocking grin. He said that if someone was a newbie, then they should properly receive their lessons. Some of the workers watching from the side quietly muttered that the thug had started again. Jung Chil then asked Hyungwoo what his name was. Hyungwoo answered calmly, introducing himself as Dan Hyungwoo. Hearing the short reply, Jung Chil's expression twisted with irritation. He angrily asked why Hyungwoo was speaking so curtly. After looking him up and down, Hyungwoo sneered. He mocked Jung Chil's body, saying that he had short arms and legs and that his build looked ridiculous. Enraged by the insult, Jung Chil shouted angrily and demanded to know what Hyungwoo had just said. The surrounding workers quickly stepped back as tension filled the air. Jung Chil clenched his fist and threatened him, asking if Hyungwoo wanted to die on his very first day. Hyungwoo felt the intense hostility coming from the man. For a brief moment, a cold thought crossed his mind. He wondered whether he should simply cut down Jung Chil. Just as Hyungwoo reached for his sword, Jung Chil's eyes widened in shock as he saw that Hyungwoo had a sword. Pointing at him, he angrily demanded to know since when porters were allowed to walk around carrying swords. He ordered him to hand it over immediately. However, Hyungwoo remained calm and simply replied that he could not give it to him. In that moment, Jung Chil felt something strange. As he looked into Hyungwoo's eyes, a chill ran down his spine. He wondered what was wrong with this man, sensing a terrifying killing intent coming from him. Unable to handle the pressure, Jung Chil suddenly backed off and muttered that it was late, so they would stop there for today. Watching him retreat, Hyungwoo calmly thought to himself that an unusually large number of people seemed to covet his sword. Jung Chil clicked his tongue in annoyance, clearly frustrated. Behind him, some of the porters quietly mocked him, saying that Jung Chil always acted like a big shot but was actually scared stiff of the newbie. To them, it served him right. Hearing the murmurs, Jung Chil immediately snapped and shouted at them, asking what they were staring at and telling everyone to get ready to sleep. The others quickly backed down, saying they should all sleep and telling everyone to wrap it up. Soon after, someone cheerfully said it had been a good day and suggested that everyone go to sleep. As the tension settled, Jung Chil turned and told Hyungwoo to follow him, saying that the shared dormitory was this way. While walking ahead, Jung Chil glanced back at Hyungwoo and thought to himself that if it were not for that sword, Hyungwoo would not even be worth a single punch. Clenching his teeth, He made a silent vow that he would pay him back for the humiliation he had suffered. Sometime later, the dormitory fell silent as everyone lay asleep under their blankets. In the middle of the night, Jong-chil slowly opened his eyes. He quietly sat up, careful not to wake the others. Moving cautiously, he got off his bedding and began creeping across the room. His gaze sharpened as he looked around, thinking that Hyungwoo should be sleeping somewhere nearby. Sweat formed on his face as tension built in his body. Suddenly, he moved forward, and in the next instant, his face slammed straight into something solid. Jong-chil froze in shock, his eyes widening as he tried to process what had just happened. Confused and slightly panicked, he thought to himself what the hell had just happened, questioning whether there had been a pillar there before. But Jong-chil suddenly froze as he looked up and realized Hyungwoo was standing right in front of him. Shock filled his face as he stumbled back, his voice trembling in disbelief. He could not understand how Hyungwoo was awake. Meanwhile, Hyungwoo, standing in front of him, remained completely calm, letting out a quiet sound. Jong-chil's eyes widened even more as he stared at him, unable to process what he was seeing. The realization hit him hard. Hyungwoo had been sleeping while standing there the entire time. After a brief pause, Jong-chil gathered himself and made a decision. Slowly, he reached out his hand toward the sword. At that exact moment, Hyungwoo's eyes suddenly opened, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Seeing that, Jong-chil instinctively froze. It was only for a single instant, but in that brief moment, something inside him completely changed. An overwhelming fear took over his entire body. It felt as if he were nothing more than a helpless herbivore standing before a ruthless carnivore. Even he could not believe it himself. But in that moment, he saw death. However, it was all just a misunderstanding. Jong-chil's body trembled uncontrollably as fear consumed him. His voice shook as he desperately begged for his life, asking to be spared. The next second, Jong-chil collapsed to the ground, trembling as he begged desperately. At the same time, Hyungwoo remained calm. He was simply circulating his inner energy to protect himself. That was also the reason why he slept while standing. This had not always been the case, but during the long period he spent inside the cave, everything changed. Back then, he lived in constant alertness. Even while resting, eating, or sleeping, he never lowered his guard. At any moment, danger could appear. Every second, lookouts warned that enemies were coming, urging everyone to eat quickly. Amid that harsh environment, Hyungwoo adapted. Over time, his body developed a habit. He began sleeping while standing, continuously circulating his inner energy to stay ready at all times. Morning arrived as the sky brightened over the rooftops. Hyungwoo let out a quiet breath, feeling a sense of relief. Then he paused slightly as he saw Jong-chil sleeping nearby. Jong-chil woke up after hearing Hyungwoo's voice. He looked up in confusion, unable to understand what had happened. His eyes widened as he stammered in shock, struggling to speak. The fear from earlier had not faded at all. He screamed and scrambled away, rushing out in panic. Watching him run away like that, Hyungwoo wondered if his name was really Jong-chil. Soon after, the atmosphere shifted as others began waking up. Someone urged everyone to hurry and get up, saying there was a mountain of work waiting for them today. Another person, still half asleep, questioned what kind of work they were talking about. Outside, the courtyard was filled with stacked wooden crates and carts waiting to be moved. In the next moment, a sudden force pushed against the crates, sending them lifting into the air. It was Hyungwoo who moved instantly. With a powerful leap, he jumped upward toward the falling crates. His body twisted mid-air as he positioned himself. Then, his foot came down hard. He landed firmly on top of one of the crates with precision. The impact echoed as the crate shook under his weight, but he remained perfectly balanced. In the next instant, he stood atop the stacked crates, steady and unmoved, as if the motion meant nothing to him. Hyungwoo looked at the crates calmly and asked if he just had to do it like that. He thought to himself that it was not difficult and wondered if this was a porter's job. The workers watched him nervously. One of them admitted that he was doing it correctly but still seemed uneasy. Hyungwoo then asked if he should handle the rest as well. The workers fell silent, unsure how to respond. After a brief pause, they told him to go ahead but warned him to be careful. In the next moment, the crates began to rise again, lifting into the air as if controlled by an invisible force. After some time, while working, some workers whispered among themselves. They could not help but feel that the new guy was not normal. At this rate, they wondered if he would end up taking all their work. Just as they came out, they saw someone standing outside, waiting. The workers immediately recognized her and greeted her respectfully, calling out to Lady Seolian and asking what had brought her there. She smiled gently and observed the scene, commenting that it looked like they were about to eat. She had come there because she was still thinking about how Hyungwoo, with a serious expression, had told her not to ever say she was sorry to him. Hearing something like that had affected her more than she expected. Seolian quietly thought about his words, wondering what he meant by telling her not to apologize. She then reflected on herself, realizing that she might be a little strange too. She could not believe she had been so curious about his words that she could not sleep and had come looking for him. Just then, Hyungwoo came out. Seeing him, Seoyeon was surprised. Then, with a gentle expression, she greeted him softly, calling out his name. The moment she said it, she was startled, realizing that she had called him by his name without even noticing. Hyungwoo told her that he had started working as a porter. Hearing that, Seoyeon asked him carefully if it had been okay, wondering if there was anything uncomfortable. Feeling a bit flustered, she hesitated before asking what he liked or disliked. But deep down, she realized that none of that was what she had actually come to ask him. Hyungwoo calmly explained that what he liked was peace. He added that what he disliked was seeing that peace being broken. After a brief pause, he continued, saying that what he truly hated was hearing a friend apologize. Hearing those words, Seoyeon was stunned. She realized that he had thought of her as a friend. A bright smile formed on her face as she told him that she would make sure never to say those words again. At that moment, some footsteps echoed softly. A voice spoke up, calling it a coincidence. Hyungwoo and Seoyeon turned their attention toward the direction of the voice. It was Peng Chae-yang, who approached them on horseback with a confident smile, greeting Se-yang and commenting that she had become even more beautiful since the last time he saw her. Seoyeon looked at him in surprise and asked why a warrior like him, who should be busy with Murim matters, had come there. Peng Chae-yang calmly explained that he had come after receiving another mission from the Murim Alliance. He added that the alliance had decided to support the Henan escort agency as much as possible. At that very moment, despite Hyungwoo's wish for peace, the situation was beginning to change. The world of Murim was slowly moving toward a violent and bloody storm. Soon after, in a dark hall, a deep, chilling voice asked a red-haired man if 30 members of the Heavenly Vigil Corps had been completely wiped out. The red-haired man apologized, saying they had failed to find out who was behind the incident. From behind the shadows, that deep, chilling voice asked how the Heavenly Vigil Corps, a force strong enough to easily overpower the Murim Alliance's Black Tortoise Corps, had been completely wiped out. A hand came out of the shadows and released a blood-like energy from its finger. That energy spread like fire around the corpses on the ground. All the bodies flew into the air. Bodies were thrown around as a terrifying, blood-like energy tore through everything. After examining all the bodies, it became clear that all of them had been taken down by a single person. That chilling voice then spoke, realizing that Chung Gi-ja had created hundreds of such monsters. But even so, it questioned how long those creations could truly stand against a blood demon being. From the darkness, a sinister figure revealed itself, its red eyes glowing, and a twisted smile spreading across its face. It calmly declared that it was looking forward to facing Chung Gi-ja.